My husband's family knew he was trading our company's most valuable secrets to our lead investor, a woman he was sleeping with, and they actively helped him do it. At a dinner meant to celebrate our success, they tried to force me out of the very company I had built. His father called it the unfortunate cost of ambition. I just smiled, agreed that ambition certainly has a price, and connected my laptop to the living room's smart TV. By the time my final slide loaded, my husband wasn't just begging me to stop, he was on his knees, watching the stock market alerts turn his family's entire portfolio into a bloodbath. In real time, if you believe that a person's life's work should be protected at all costs, stick around. Your support helps us tell stories about the fight for what's right. Now, let's get into how it all fell apart. The air in our office tasted like success. It was a metallic, ozonic scent from the server racks mixed with the expensive, earthy smell of the pour-over coffee our head of engineering, Ben, insisted was essential for optimal coding. From my glass-walled office on the 30th floor, the Austin skyline sprawled out under a relentless August sun, the heat shimmering off the glass towers and the distant, green rolling hills. This was Helios, our company, our creation, and at its heart was Ithaca, my life's work. An AI algorithm that could predict hereditary diseases with 98% accuracy based on a simple blood test. It was going to save lives. It was also going to be worth billions. Liam, my husband and our CEO, stood in the center of the open plan office, his voice effortlessly commanding the attention of our entire team. He had that rare kind of charisma that made people want to follow him, to believe in the vision he painted with his words. I was the architect, the one who built the engine, but he was the one who made the world want to buy the car. To Helios, he toasted, raising a bottle of ridiculously overpriced champagne. And to our lead investor, Victoria Sterling, for believing in us. The team cheered. I smiled, catching his eye across the room. He winked, a private gesture that, for 5 years, had felt like our own secret language. Lately, though, it felt more like a performance. The celebration was for our latest round of funding. A cool $50 million. All spearheaded by Victoria. She was a legend in the venture capital world, known for her Midas touch and her ruthless tactics. She saw our potential early, and for that, I was grateful, but her intensity was unsettling. In board meetings, her laser-focused gaze wasn't on our profit margins, it was on the Ithaca protocol itself. As if she was trying to peel back the layers and possess the code with her eyes alone. That Sunday was the obligatory family brunch at the Connolly's lakeside home. It was a world away from the sleek, modern lines of Helios. Their house was Old Austin, a sprawling stone affair with wilting hydrangeas and a faint, persistent smell of mildew and old money. The air was thick with a humidity that even the overworked air conditioning couldn't defeat. Maeve, Liam's mother, greeted us at the door, her smile as bright and brittle as spun sugar. Elara, darling, you look productive. Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of my simple linen dress before she turned her full, adoring attention to her son. Liam, you must be exhausted from all your success. Declan, his father, was holding court by the fireplace, pontificating about the market to Liam's sister, Fiona, who nodded along with a practiced, publicist's smile. Declan had the look of a man who wore his past failures like an ill-fitting suit. His own manufacturing business had gone under a decade ago, a spectacular bankruptcy that he never spoke of but that hung in the air whenever he was in a room. His desperation for Liam's success was almost suffocating. He saw Helios not as our creation, but as his redemption. The tension was, as always, palpable. The clinking of forks on Maeve's antique china seemed unnaturally loud. The conversation was a carefully curated minefield of backhanded compliments and passive-aggressive jabs. It was all so exhausting. And then Sean arrived. Liam's younger brother was the family's ghost, an artist who lived in a warehouse apartment downtown and only appeared at these events when emotionally blackmailed by his mother. He drifted in wearing paint-stained jeans and a faded t-shirt, his presence immediately sucking the manicured energy out of the room. He was quiet, observant, and the only one who didn't seem to be performing. He found me on the back patio, where I'd escaped to watch the paddleboarders glide across the unnaturally still lake. "Heard you closed the new round. Congrats," he said, his voice low. He held a sketchbook, his thumb smudging a charcoal drawing of a bird trapped in a cage. "Thanks, Sean. It was a team effort." He stared out at the water, not looking at me. All great Greek tragedies start with a deal made in the dark. You know, the comment was so out of place, so strange, that I just blinked. "You should ask your CEO about his father's first deal. Elara, before the bankruptcy. It's quite the story." Before I could ask what he meant, Maeve's sharp voice cut through the thick air. "Sean, stop bothering Elara with your morbid nonsense and come have some quiche." He gave me a final, meaningful look, then disappeared back inside. The car ride home was quiet. The setting sun painted the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. "What was Sean talking to you about?" Liam asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Nothing, really, just being Sean. He's jealous," Liam snapped, his voice tight. "He's always been jealous. Dad gave him every chance to join the family business back in the day. But he'd rather starve in a loft than do a day of honest work. Don't listen to a word he says." I wanted to believe him. I really did. I loved this man, the charismatic visionary who had convinced me to leave a stable job at Google and build a dream with him. But as I leaned my head against the cool glass of the passenger window, Sean's words echoed in my mind. A deal made in the dark. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left Liam snoring softly in our bed and went to my home office. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of infinite possibilities. I pulled up the source code for Ithaca, my algorithm, my creation, thousands of lines of complex, beautiful logic that I knew better than my own reflection. But for the first time, as I stared at the screen, a cold sliver of fear lodged itself in my heart. I was starting to wonder who else had the keys to my kingdom. Sean's words became a stone in my shoe, a small, persistent irritant I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed the brunch, I tried to push it aside, chalking it up to the Connolly family's weird, toxic dynamic. Liam was right. Sean was likely just jealous. It was easier to believe that than the alternative. But the world has a way of showing you things you're not ready to see. The small inconsistencies started to pile up, each one a tiny crack in the foundation of the life I thought we had. Liam's late nights became more frequent. I'd wake at 2 a.m. to an empty space beside me in our king-sized bed, the sheets cold to the touch. I'd find him in his home study, the door cracked just enough for a sliver of blue light to spill into the hallway. His voice a low, urgent murmur. The moment he heard the floorboards creak under my feet, the call would end. "Another late one?" I'd ask, leaning against the doorframe, my arms crossed. "Strategy call with Victoria," he'd say, rubbing his eyes with a practiced weariness. "She's mapping out the Series B funding. It's relentless." He'd walk over and kiss me. But I started to notice a new scent on the collar of his shirts. Something I couldn't place. It wasn't another woman's perfume, it was her perfume. Victoria Sterling's signature scent, a distinct, smoky sandalwood that was as bold and expensive as she was. It lingered in our bedroom long after he'd fallen asleep. Then came the secrecy. I walked into his study one afternoon to ask about dinner, and he slammed his laptop shut with a loud clap of plastic. He looked up, his face a mask of casual surprise. But his heart was pounding. I could see the frantic pulse in his neck. "Hey, you," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Didn't hear you come in. Everything okay?" I asked, gesturing to the closed laptop. "Just VC stuff, babe, all the boring legal and financial details. It would put you to sleep," he said, a little too quickly. It was the first time he had ever dismissed my intelligence. I was the woman who had designed a quantum-level AI in my master's thesis. But suddenly, venture capital was over my head? It was a clumsy lie. And it stung more than the secrecy itself. The real alarm bell, the one that went from a quiet hum to a deafening shriek, rang a week later. Liam, who usually treated the inner workings of Ithaca with a kind of reverent ignorance, started asking questions, deeply technical questions. If we wanted to give an investor a real-time diagnostic view of the protocol's learning progression, How would we set up those permissions without compromising the core code? He asked one evening, peering over my shoulder as I worked. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. We wouldn't, I said slowly, turning to look at him. There's no such thing. Giving anyone that level of access would be like giving them the blueprints to the entire system. It's the one thing we can't ever do. Liam, it's our only real trade secret. Right, of course, he said, backing away. Just thinking out loud, Victoria is just so focused on transparency. Gotta keep our investors happy. His excuse was plausible, but his question felt surgical, like he was probing for a specific vulnerability. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. My creation, Ithaca, felt less like a shared dream and more like a territory I had to defend. At midnight, after Liam was asleep, I slipped out of bed and went back to my office. Driven by a knot of anxiety I could no longer ignore, I did something I hadn't done in years. I ran a full, deep-level security audit on our servers. I told myself it was just routine, a CTO being diligent. But I knew I was looking for something. For hours, I saw nothing. The system was clean, firewalls intact, encryption stable. I was about to give up, to dismiss it all as paranoia, when I saw it, a tiny anomaly in the server logs that would be invisible to anyone but me. A recurring data ping, just a few kilobytes each time, originating from an IP address that was masked by a series of proxy servers. It was a digital whisper, so faint it was almost non-existent, but it was there. Someone was knocking on our back door. Very, very quietly. My blood ran cold. I spent the next hour peeling back layers of digital security, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a frantic energy. I traced the IP through servers in Romania and Estonia before the trail went dead at a private, encrypted node in Switzerland. It was a dead end, but the sophistication of the masking told me this was no random hacker. This was professional. With a growing sense of dread, I navigated to the system's core user permissions. Every employee, every credential, every level of access was something I had personally designed. It was a fortress, and that's when I found the secret door. It was a credential I didn't recognize, created 3 months ago using Liam's highest-level executive authorization key. It was cleverly disguised, labeled system_health_diagnostic_v2, and programmed to fly under the radar of my standard security sweeps. A ghost in the machine. A back door built by my husband. My breath hitched. My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. With a trembling hand, I pulled the access logs for the ghost credential. The screen filled with lines of data, timestamps, and query details that made me feel physically ill. Victoria Sterling hadn't just been given a key. Liam had built her a private portal. The logs showed that this portal had been accessed dozens of times. Always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The timestamps aligned perfectly with Liam's late-night strategy sessions. And the queries weren't just for transparency. They were deep, extractive commands, running complex simulations against Ithaca's core predictive models. It was corporate espionage on a grand scale. She wasn't just observing my algorithm, she was stress-testing it, learning its every strength and weakness, and downloading the results. C'est incroyable, the sheer audacity. I leaned back in my chair, the sterile, chilled air of the server room suddenly feeling suffocating. The low, steady hum of the machines that powered my life's work sounded like a funeral dirge. The man I had shared my bed with, the man I had built a company with, had taken the most precious thing I had ever created and handed it over to a predator. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had betrayed our dream, our team, our future. And as I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen that showed the digital footprint of his deceit, the initial shock began to curdle into something else. Something cold, quiet, and dangerously focused. For 2 days, I lived with the knowledge of the ghost portal like a shard of ice in my heart. I went through the motions of my life, team meetings, code reviews, dinners with Liam, but it was all an act. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces where I used to feel safe. Every time Liam smiled at me, every time he said, "I love you," the words felt like a smokescreen, A carefully constructed illusion to keep me from looking at what was happening in the shadows. Confronting him was pointless. I knew he would lie. He would gaslight me, call me paranoid, and praise Victoria's business acumen, framing the backdoor access as a necessary, if unorthodox, step towards securing our future. No, I couldn't show my hand yet. I had the what, but I didn't understand the why. Not really, and I didn't know the endgame. The answer, or at least the beginning of it, was waiting for me at the annual Innovate Texas Summit. A 3-day schmooze fest at a sprawling, terracotta-roofed resort in the hill country. Normally, I loved these events. The energy, the exchange of ideas, the sense of being on the cutting edge of the future. It was intoxicating. But this time, it felt like a masquerade ball. Every smile seemed predatory, every handshake a calculation. Liam was in his element, of course, moving through the crowd with an easy charm. Our company's name on his lips. Victoria Sterling's name never far behind. Victoria's vision for the sector is revolutionary. I heard him tell the editor of a major tech journal. I watched from a distance, nursing a club soda, feeling like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. It was during the cocktail reception on the first night that the whispers found me. I was standing near the massive limestone fireplace, trying to look engaged in a conversation about blockchain, when I heard her name. Sterling is a shark, a man with a Stanford hoodie was saying to a small group of VCs. She's a kingmaker, for sure, but only if you're willing to give her the keys to your kingdom. And then the throne. Another man chuckled grimly. Ask the founders of Aperture Dynamics. She loved their imaging tech. Invested $50 million. A year later, she owned the patents, and they were trying to sue her with whatever money they had left. My body went rigid. I turned my back slightly to the group, pretending to be absorbed in the artwork on the wall. But my ears were straining to catch every word. It's her playbook, a woman in a sharp blazer added. She finds a brilliant tech with a weak or malleable business lead. She leverages one against the other until she can scoop up the IP for pennies on the dollar. She's not a company builder, she's an IP pirate. The blood drained from my face. A brilliant tech with a malleable business lead. The description was so precise, so chillingly accurate, it felt like they were talking directly about me and Liam. A moment later, a man approached me, his eyes dark and tired. He looked vaguely familiar. I thought I'd seen his face in a tech magazine a few years back. He was holding a glass of whiskey that looked like it wasn't his first. "You're Elara Vance, from Helios, right?" he asked, his voice low and raspy. "I am. Julian Croft," he said, extending a hand. The name clicked. He was the former CTO of Aperture Dynamics. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" We stepped outside onto a terrace overlooking the rolling, scrub-covered hills. The air was cooler now, filled with the sound of cicadas. "I've seen you with Victoria," he began, staring out into the darkness. "I know the look. She tells you you're a visionary, that your tech is the most brilliant thing she's ever seen. She's charming, intoxicating, makes you feel like you're the only person in the world who matters." He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were filled with a profound, haunted sadness. "Let me guess, your partner, the CEO, is getting all the public attention, while you're the one getting late-night calls about investor transparency and the need for unprecedented access." I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my silence a confirmation. "She's not your partner, Elara," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She's your executioner. She doesn't want to build your company. She wants to own your algorithm. She will use your husband, his ambition, his ego, whatever weaknesses he has, to get it, and the second she has secured the intellectual property, you will both become liabilities. She's not building a portfolio, she's building an arsenal, and your life's work is the next weapon she wants to add to it." He finished his whiskey in one gulp, gave me a sad, knowing nod, and walked away, leaving me alone on the terrace with his terrifying prophecy hanging in the air. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Liam. I almost didn't answer, but I forced myself to. "Hey, how's it going? Closing any deals?" His voice was bright, full of the artificial hype of the summit. "It's fine," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and distant. Good. Hey, I was just talking to Dad. He's so thrilled about how hands-on Victoria is being. He loves her approach. There was a pause. He said, "You know, this is how the big leagues work. Sometimes you have to give a little to get a lot." He said we have to do whatever it takes to keep her happy. Whatever it takes. The line landed like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just Liam. It was his father, Declan, feeding him this poison. It was his whole family. Their desperation, their ambition, their shame. They were all complicit. They were all pushing him to sacrifice me and my work on the altar of their own redemption. Standing there, under the vast, star-filled Texas sky, I finally understood. This wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a conspiracy, and I was standing right in the center of it. I flew back from the summit on the last flight out of San Antonio. The sterile, recycled air of the cabin feeling heavy and toxic. Julian Croft's words were a brand on my mind. "She's not your partner. She's your executioner." Every detail he described, every step in Victoria's predatory playbook, was a perfect match for my reality. Liam's phone call had been the final, damning confirmation. His family wasn't just aware, they were active participants, urging him to do whatever it takes. The fear that had been simmering for weeks had finally boiled away, leaving behind something hard and clear: determination. I was no longer a confused wife trying to understand her husband's secrecy. I was the CTO of a tech company facing a hostile takeover from within. And I would defend my life's work with the same ruthless logic I used to write code. I knew I couldn't do it alone. The ghost portal was my territory. But the deeper motivations were financial. The next morning, while Liam was at a strategy breakfast with Victoria, I was in a nondescript office building in a quiet, forgotten corner of East Austin. The sign on the door read, "Sharma and Associates, Financial Forensics." A name that promised discretion. Anya Sharma was a woman in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately trusted. There was no pretense, no small talk. I bought her a coffee from the place downstairs. And we got to work. "So," she said, after I'd spent 20 minutes laying out the ghost portal, Victoria's reputation, and the Connolly family's bizarre behavior. "Your lead investor is stealing your intellectual property with your husband's help. And his family is cheering him on. It's not about an affair, is it?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "The affair, if there is one, feels like a tool, not the objective. This is bigger. They're being controlled. It feels like she has leverage over them. Something that gives her the power to make them do this. I need to find the strings." Anya nodded slowly, a small, grim smile touching her lips. "Leverage is my specialty. We'll start with the father. Desperate men with big egos are always the easiest to break." For the next week, I lived a double life. By day, I was Elara Vance, CTO of Helios, calm and professional in meetings, deflecting Liam's increasingly specific technical questions with vague answers about system upgrades. But by night, after he was asleep, I was an investigator, hunched over my laptop until 3 a.m., sifting through the digital ashes of Declan Connolly's past. With Anya guiding me, I pulled every public document related to the 2012 bankruptcy of Connolly Manufacturing. The court filings painted a grim picture of mismanagement and bad bets. Declan had leveraged the company to the hilt, chasing a lucrative government contract that ultimately went to a competitor. When it fell through, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. The initial creditor lists were predictable: banks, suppliers, the usual casualties of a business collapse. But Anya, with her trained eye for corporate subterfuge, spotted the anomaly. During the final bankruptcy proceedings, the largest, most significant chunk of Declan's secured debt, the loans tied directly to his family home and personal assets, wasn't written off. It was purchased, for pennies on the dollar. A single, obscure entity called North Star Asset Management had bought Declan Connolly's ruin. "That's odd," Anya said over our encrypted video call, her screen shared with mine. "A bank would just want to liquidate. Why would a holding company want to buy the personal debt of a failed businessman? It's not a growth asset. Unless the asset isn't the money," I whispered, a sickening realization dawning on me. Unless the asset is the man. The hunt for North Star Asset Management became our obsession. It was a a shell company designed to be impenetrable. Its articles of incorporation were filed in Delaware. Its mailing address was a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. It had no website, no employees, no public footprint. It existed only on paper. A legal fiction created for the sole purpose of hiding its owner. For days, we hit nothing but firewalls and dead ends. It felt hopeless. The breakthrough came from the most mundane place imaginable. A digitized municipal tax filing from 2013. Buried deep in the metadata of a PDF, Anya found a digital signature. A ghost of a name that had been imperfectly scrubbed from the document. A junior paralegal who had certified the debt transfer. Got you. Anya breathed. An hour of frantic searching on legal databases and LinkedIn gave us what we needed. The paralegal had spent her entire early career at one place, the in-house legal department of Sterling Capital. Victoria's firm. Anya called me at 2:17 a.m. I was in my office, staring at the Ithaca Code, feeling a wave of despair. Her voice on the phone was quiet, but it carried the electric charge of a massive discovery. Elara, North Star Asset Management is Victoria Sterling. I sank into my chair. The phone pressed hard against my ear. Anya continued, her voice laying out the cold, hard facts. She set up the shell company 10 years ago. She anonymously bought Declan's debt when he was at his most vulnerable. She didn't foreclose. She didn't demand payment. She just held it. She owned his failure, his shame, his future. For a decade, she's had a financial guillotine hanging over the entire Connolly family. One missed payment, and she could have taken everything, their house, their savings, all of it. Suddenly, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The family's desperation, Declan's obsession with Helios's success, Maeve's frantic social climbing, Liam's malleability. It wasn't just about ambition. It was about a decade of terror. They weren't Victoria's partners. They were her hostages. My husband wasn't just having an affair with our lead investor. He was a pawn in a brutal, decade-long game of blackmail. Victoria hadn't invested in Helios because she believed in our vision. She had invested because her asset, Declan Connolly, had a son who was married to the brilliant woman who had created the Ithaca Protocol. This was her endgame, the ultimate collection on a debt that had been gathering interest for 10 years. She didn't just want a return on her investment. She wanted it all, and she had been using the man I loved as her weapon. Knowing the truth of the blackmail was like looking at a familiar photograph and suddenly seeing a figure lurking in the shadows that you'd never noticed before. Everything was recontextualized. Every tense family brunch, every forced smile from Maeve, every booming, over-enthusiastic speech from Declan. It was all a performance. A desperate dance for their financial survival. Choreographed by Victoria Sterling. I understood the why now. But I still needed the when and the how. What was Victoria's final move? I had proof of the crime. But I needed to know the details of the ambush to survive it. And for that, I needed an insider. My target was Fiona. Fiona was the family's polisher. As a PR professional, her job was to spin narratives. To make the unpalatable seem aspirational. I had watched her for years, smoothing over her father's awkward remarks and framing her mother's social climbing as community engagement. She was complicit, no doubt, but unlike the others, she wasn't a true believer. I could see the flicker of discomfort in her eyes, the slight hesitation before she delivered a family-approved talking point. Her loyalty wasn't to the cause, it was to the appearance of unity. And that made her vulnerable. I set the meeting at a trendy, obnoxiously loud coffee shop on South Congress, a place where privacy was guaranteed by the sheer volume of noise. The pretext was simple. I needed her PR advice on a media strategy for Helios's next feature rollout. It was a perfect corporate excuse. She arrived looking flawless in a crisp, white blazer, her smile firmly in place. Elara, so good to see you. Things are just stratospheric at Helios, aren't they? Liam is a rock star. We made small talk for precisely 5 minutes. The roar of the espresso machine punctuating her polished corporate speak. Then, I leaned forward, my voice low. I'm worried about Liam. Fiona. Her smile tightened. Just a fraction. Worried? He's on top of the world. He seems, under an immense amount of pressure from Victoria. The late nights, the secrecy, It's not like him. She went into full PR mode. A wall of practiced deflection. That's just the A-League. Elara, Victoria is a demanding investor. But it's what's best for the company. Liam knows what he's doing. You have to trust his business instincts. I let her finish. Then I slid my phone across the table. An image already on the screen. It was a screenshot of the Ghost Portal's access logs, dozens of entries. All time-stamped between 1 and 4 a.m. Then I'm sure you can give me the approved talking point for this. I said, my voice flat. This is Victoria Sterling's digital signature. All over my source code. My intellectual property. The color drained from her face. The professional mask didn't just crack, it shattered. She stared at the screen. Her mouth opening and closing silently. I'm sure there's an explanation. A misunderstanding. Oh, I think I have the explanation. I said, leaning in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the cafe's noise. I let the name hang in the air between us. I know about North Star Asset Management. She physically recoiled. A small, sharp intake of breath. Her eyes darted around the coffee shop as if looking for an escape route. She looked trapped. She looked terrified. I know Victoria owns your father's debt. I continued, pressing my advantage. I know she's been holding it over your family for a decade. I know she owns all of you. Tears welled in her eyes. A mixture of fear and, for the first time, genuine despair. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling. My dad, after the bankruptcy. He was destroyed. We were going to lose everything. Victoria was the only way out. At first, it was just a safety net. But when you and Liam started Helios, she saw a new way for us to pay her back. This was it, the confession. I made sure my phone, sitting on the table, was recording every word. She's not going to save you. Fiona, I said, my tone shifting from accusation to cold logic. You've read the articles. You've heard the whispers. You know her playbook. She takes the IP and she burns the founders to cover her tracks. Do you honestly believe she's going to leave a trail of co-conspirators behind? The moment she has full control of Ithaca, your family is no longer an asset. You're a liability. The brutal, pragmatic truth of it hit her. I could see the calculation in her eyes as her loyalty to her family warred with her instinct for self-preservation. What does she want? I asked. What's the final move? And then it all came spilling out. The words tumbling over each other in a frantic, desperate torrent. Next week, Dad and Mom are hosting a founders dinner at the lake house. It's supposed to be a celebration. Her laugh was brittle and humorless. Victoria will be there. The plan is to corner you. They have a new leadership proposal. They're going to offer you a small buyout to sign over your IP rights and step away quietly. And if I refuse? Fiona wouldn't meet my eyes. She stared into her now cold latte. They've been working with her legal team to build a case against you. Fabricated evidence, claims of erratic behavior and professional incompetence. They'll fire you for cause and seize your shares. They think you'll take the deal to avoid public humiliation. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. They were going to destroy my reputation. The one thing I had built with my own 2 hands. To get what they wanted. Fiona started gathering her things. Her hands shaking. I have to go. You can't tell them I told you. Elara, please. My dad, he's not evil. He's just broken. He's a willing accomplice. Fiona, so are you. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Then turned and fled, disappearing into the bustling Austin crowd. I sat there for a long time. The recording saved and backed up to a secure cloud. The noise of the coffee shop faded into a dull roar. The trap was no longer a vague premonition. It had a date, a time, and a location. They had planned my execution down to the last detail. What they didn't know was that the condemned had just been handed a copy of the executioner's plans. And I was already rewriting the ending. Fiona's confession was the roadmap I needed. I walked away from that coffee shop not with a sense of victory, but with a cold, terrifying clarity. The betrayal was no longer a shadowy suspicion. It was a detailed conspiracy with a time and a place for my public execution. A quiet rage, methodical and precise, settled over me. They wanted to humiliate me, to paint me as erratic and incompetent. They had fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. The first call I made was to Anya Sharma. I have an insider. I have a date for the ambush. And I have a confession, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I played her the recording of my conversation with Fiona. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mon Dieu, Anya breathed. They put it all on the table. The blackmail, the buyout, the character assassination. She handed you everything. She handed me the ammunition. I corrected. Now I need someone to help me build the gun. Anya knew exactly who to call. 24 hours later, I was in a sterile downtown boardroom that smelled of lemon polish and ambition. Sitting across from Jasmine Cardenas. She was a corporate litigator with a reputation for being a shark. But in person, she was calm, focused, and radiated a confidence that was deeply reassuring. I spent an hour walking them through everything. Sean's warning. The ghost portal logs. Julian's prophecy at the summit. The decade of blackmail tied to North Star Asset Management. And finally, Fiona's tearful confession. I laid out the printed evidence on the gleaming mahogany table. Anya pointed out the financial trails while I explained the technical violations. Jasmine listened intently, her fingers steepled, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, she was silent for a moment, looking at the web of deceit spread across the table. This is beautiful, she said, and I realized she was a woman who saw a meticulously documented conspiracy the way I saw a perfectly structured algorithm. This isn't just a breach of fiduciary duty or a simple IP theft case. Elara, the ongoing nature of the blackmail, the involvement of multiple family members, the clear intent to defraud you and the company. We're looking at a textbook conspiracy case. Potentially even RICO violations, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the law designed to take down the mob. For the next 5 days, we worked with a singular, obsessive focus. My life became a series of encrypted video calls, secure file transfers, and late nights fueled by coffee and a burning sense of purpose. With Fiona's confession as our guide, we knew exactly where to look. Anya worked her magic, transforming the suspicion of blackmail into irrefutable proof. She traced the payments from Victoria's fund to the North Star Shell Company. From there, she found it, a series of small, regular wire transfers to another company, a consulting firm registered to Declan Connolly. The memo line on each transfer was the same: strategic advisory fees. It was the kickback, the payment for his family's cooperation. Meanwhile, I used my knowledge of the Helios servers to corroborate Fiona's timeline. I legally pulled email metadata, not the contents, but the sender, receiver, and timestamp logs. Every time Fiona said there was a secret family meeting, I found a flurry of emails between Declan, Liam, and Maeve. Every time she mentioned a call with Victoria, I found the corresponding encrypted video conference log on Liam's calendar. One night, sifting through old digital archives, I found a photo of Declan and a much younger Liam, taken years before the bankruptcy. They were standing on the factory floor of Connolly Manufacturing, both beaming, the picture of father-son success. Looking at Declan's proud face, a flicker of something, not pity, but a need to understand, made me pull up the old bankruptcy auction files again. The memory wasn't mine, but it played out in my mind with stark clarity, pieced together from newspaper clippings and court records. I pictured Declan standing at the back of a crowded auction hall, watching as his company was dismantled piece by piece. The machinery he'd inherited from his own father sold for scrap. The patents he'd developed sold to a competitor. I saw him not as a monster, but as a man drowning in public humiliation, his name becoming a local cautionary tale. The flashback didn't excuse what he was doing now, but it gave his desperation a human face. He wasn't just chasing success, he was running from the ghost of that failure. A ghost that Victoria Sterling had expertly weaponized. On the eve of the founders' dinner, we assembled the final dossier. It wasn't a clunky binder of printed documents. It was a sleek, devastating presentation, each slide a perfectly timed kill shot. Slide 1. A title. The Ithaca Protocol. A case study in tortious interference and corporate fraud. Slide 2. A timeline, showing the creation of North Star Asset Management juxtaposed with the date of Declan's bankruptcy. Slide 3. A flowchart, illustrating the wire transfers from Victoria, through the shell company, to Declan. Slide 4. A screenshot of the ghost portal's access logs. Slide 5. An audio file. Embedded and ready to play. A clip of Fiona's voice. Clear as a bell, saying, "They'll fire you for cause and seize your shares." Jasmine, Anya, and I sat in the boardroom, looking at the final slide. It was a simple, elegant photo of the Connolly Lake house. "Don't get emotional," Jasmine advised, her voice calm and steady. "Don't raise your voice. Don't threaten. Just present the facts. Let the evidence speak for itself." The silence that follows. "Elara, that will be your real victory." I drove home, the presentation saved on an encrypted USB stick that felt as heavy as a brick in my purse. Liam was in the kitchen, humming, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Ready for the big night tomorrow?" he asked, smiling. "It's going to be a celebration. The beginning of our empire." I took the glass, my hand perfectly steady. "I can't wait," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "I have a feeling it's going to be a night none of us will ever forget." The drive out to the lake house was surreal. Liam was next to me, radiating a nervous energy he was trying to pass off as excitement. He talked animatedly about synergy, about market disruption, about the empire we were going to build. It was a performance, and a damn good one. He was playing the role of the devoted husband and visionary CEO. Completely unaware that I had a copy of the real script. In my purse, the encrypted USB stick felt like a small, cold piece of lead. The house was lit up against the bruised purple of the Texas twilight. Every window glowing, it looked warm and inviting. A perfect picture of family and success. But I knew it was a stage, meticulously set for my public humiliation. Maeve greeted us at the door, resplendent in a silk caftan. Her smile stretched taut across her face. Declan was already holding a glass of scotch, laughing a little too loudly at something one of his old business cronies was saying. The air was thick with the smell of grilled cedar plank salmon, expensive perfume, and desperation. Victoria Sterling arrived last, of course. Making an entrance, she wore a severe, black dress that was both elegant and vaguely threatening. She moved through the room like a queen surveying her territory. She kissed Maeve on both cheeks, shook Declan's hand with firm familiarity, and then let her hand rest on Liam's arm for a fraction of a second too long. It was a subtle gesture of ownership. He was hers, they all were. We sat down to a dinner that was excruciating in its civility. The conversation was a masterpiece of subtext, a web of coded language and veiled intentions. Declan proposed a toast. "To the future," he said, raising his glass and looking directly at me. "To Helios, and to the kind of bold, unsentimental leadership required to take it to the next level." It wasn't a toast, it was a warning. Maeve chimed in, placing a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. "We are so proud of you, Elara, dear, but a creation must eventually leave its creator to truly soar. It's the ultimate, selfless act of a founder." It wasn't a compliment, it was my eulogy. I ate my salmon, nodded, and smiled, playing the part of the oblivious tech genius. The woman too lost in her algorithms to understand the sophisticated world of business. I let them believe they were in complete control. After the dessert plates were cleared, Declan cleared his throat, tapping his glass with a fork. The performance was about to begin. "Elara," he started, his voice adopting a tone of feigned, fatherly concern. "As we move into this next, crucial phase for Helios, we, along with our lead investor, feel that a strategic pivot in leadership is necessary for growth." Victoria took her cue, her voice as smooth and cold as the marble fireplace behind her. "Elara, your technical genius is, without question, the foundation of this company. You are a true visionary." She let the compliment hang in the air before delivering the blow. However, the demands of a publicly traded company require a different kind of executive temperament. A focus on the market, not just the machine. She slid a slim, leather-bound folder across the table towards me. "We have prepared a proposal that we feel honors your foundational contribution while positioning Helios for its next chapter. It's a generous severance package and a multi-year consulting agreement. All it requires is for you to step down as CTO and sign over your controlling shares and intellectual property rights to the board." Liam wouldn't look at me. He stared intently at the centerpiece as if it were the most fascinating object in the world. Declan pushed a pen towards me. This was it, the ambush. They expected me to break down, to argue, to cry. They were prepared for an emotional outburst. They were not prepared for what I did next. I looked at the folder, then back at their expectant faces. And I smiled. A calm, genuine smile. "Thank you," I said, my voice even. "That's a very thorough presentation. It's funny, I've prepared a short presentation of my own in response." The shift in the room was instantaneous. The confident, predatory expressions on their faces dissolved into confusion. I reached into my purse and pulled out my sleek, silver laptop and a small HDMI adapter. "What are you doing?" Liam finally managed to say, his voice a choked whisper. "Just offering my perspective," I said cheerfully, walking over to their 80-inch smart TV. "You can't make a decision this big without analyzing all the data. Right?" I connected my laptop. The TV screen flickered. Then my desktop appeared, a clean, minimalist background with a single file in the center. I clicked it open. I stood before them, not as a victim, but as a CEO delivering a quarterly report. "Good evening," I began. The first slide loaded, the title stark against the black background. "The Ithaca Protocol, a case study in tortious interference and corporate fraud." A collective gasp went through the room. "Let's begin with a timeline," I said, clicking to the next slide. A chart appeared, showing the date of Declan's bankruptcy directly beside the date of incorporation for a company called North Star Asset Management. Declan's face went white as a sheet. "As we can see," I continued, my voice as calm as a CBC News anchor's, "North Star acquired the entirety of Connolly Manufacturing's debt. An interesting investment, considering the company was worthless. Let's follow the money." The next slide was a flowchart. Arrows moved from Sterling Capital to the North Star Shell Company, and then to a consulting firm registered to Declan Connolly. The wire transfers, complete with dates and amounts, were listed in a neat column. The kickbacks. Maeve made a small, strangled sound. "Of course, to justify this investment, the asset, that is to say, Helios, had to be thoroughly evaluated," I said, clicking again. A screenshot of the ghost portal's access logs filled the screen. This evaluation involved 117 unauthorized breaches of our secure servers, constituting corporate espionage on a massive scale. Victoria's composure finally cracked. A muscle in her jaw twitched. Liam looked down at his hands, his whole body trembling. "Now, you might be asking, how could a family be convinced to participate in such a high-risk conspiracy?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air. "I believe this will answer that question." I didn't speed away from the lake house. I drove the speed limit, my hands steady on the wheel. The windows down, the humid Texas air, thick with the scent of pine and night-blooming jasmine, felt cleansing, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. There was no elation, no triumphant roar of victory. There was only a profound, echoing silence in my soul. The war was over. The cost had been immense. But the peace was absolute. The fallout was swift and spectacular. By Monday morning, the story was already leaking onto the financial newswires. By noon, it was a full-blown inferno. Venture capital titan Victoria Sterling ousted amidst fraud and blackmail allegations. Her own board of directors, to save their firm from the ensuing SEC investigation, severed ties with her immediately. Her empire, built on the wreckage of other people's dreams, had crumbled to dust in less than 48 hours. The Connollys' ruin was quieter but no less complete. The SEC froze all their assets, pending the investigation. Declan's desperate bid for redemption had led him to a second, more public and humiliating, failure. Maeve's carefully curated social world evaporated overnight. Her friends stopped returning her calls. The lake house went on the market. Another casualty in the war they had started. The divorce was a clinical, bloodless affair handled entirely by our lawyers. I saw Liam one last time across the long, polished table in a deposition room. He looked hollowed out, the charisma and confidence gone, replaced by the dull, haunted look of a man who had bet everything on the wrong hand and lost. I felt nothing for him. No anger, no sadness, just a profound, empty pity. He was a ghost, a casualty of his own weakness. The end of Helios was my decision. With Jasmine's guidance, we triggered a key person clause in the shareholder agreement. The clause stipulated that if the lead technical founder, me, was removed without cause, the company's core intellectual property would revert to my personal ownership, since their entire plan was predicated on a fraudulent, for cause, firing. Their conspiracy had inadvertently handed me the keys to my own freedom. I dissolved the company, letting the toxic Helios name die along with the partnership. My loyal engineering team, the ones who had built Ithaca with me line by line, stood by me. We didn't rebuild in a gleaming downtown tower. We started over in a converted warehouse in East Austin, with exposed brick walls, huge windows that let in the morning light, and a culture built on a single principle: transparency. We called our new company Veritas AI, the Latin word for truth. 6 months later, I was sitting at an outdoor table at a small, unpretentious coffee shop, the kind with mismatched furniture and a friendly dog that slept by the door. The man sitting across from me sketched in his notebook, his charcoal-smudged fingers holding a pencil with practiced ease. Sean Connolly looked up and smiled. A real smile this time. "Heard you closed a new funding round. On your own terms. All clean," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "No secret deals. No ghosts in the machine." He had reached out a week ago with a simple email. "Heard you're free. Coffee?" I had agreed immediately. "I wanted to thank you, Sean," I said quietly. "You were the only one who told me the truth." He shook his head, not meeting my eyes. He turned his sketchbook around. It wasn't a bird in a cage. It was a drawing of a vast, open landscape, with a single, clear path winding towards the horizon. I just pointed out the cage. He said, "You were the one who figured out how to fly." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Two survivors of the same storm. From different sides of the wreckage. He was rebuilding his life. His art finding a new, more honest voice. And I was building my company. Not on the promise of $1 billion valuation, but on the foundation of work that was real and valuable. As I left the coffee shop and walked out into the bright Austin sun, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my team. A breakthrough in the Ithaca, now Veritas, protocol. A new diagnostic success. I smiled. The past was a ghost. But the future was a clean, elegant line of code, waiting to be written. And for the first time in a very long time, I was the sole architect of my own design. I clicked the final time. An audio player appeared on the screen. And I hit play. Fiona's voice, clear and terrified, filled the dead silence of the room. "They've been working with her legal team to build a case against you. Fabricated evidence. They'll fire you for cause and seize your shares." Fiona let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. The audio file ended. I advanced to the final slide. It was a simple, high-resolution photograph of the house they were all sitting in. The silence that followed was the most profound I have ever experienced. It was heavy, absolute, and utterly devastating. It was the sound of ruin. Victoria was the first to speak. Her voice a low, venomous snarl. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Oh, I do," I said, turning to face her directly. I began to pack up my laptop. My movements calm and deliberate. An hour ago, a copy of this entire dossier was delivered via secured courier to the head of the Ethics Committee at Sterling Capital, your board of directors, and the Enforcement Division of the Securities and Exchange Commission. I believe the legal term for a decade-long blackmail and fraud scheme is racketeering. Jasmine Cardenas, my lawyer, sends her regards. I snapped my laptop shut and slid it into my bag. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, walking towards the front door. "I believe this founder's dinner is over." I walked out into the warm Texas night, not looking back. I didn't need to. I could feel the wreckage of their lives burning behind me. At its core, Elara's story is a powerful, almost chilling, reminder of a difficult truth: the most dangerous threats to our peace, our work, and our very sense of self often don't come from declared enemies, but from the people sitting at our own table. It's a story about the slow, Quiet erosion of trust and the discovery that the life you've so carefully built is being used as collateral in someone else's desperate game. So many of us have felt that subtle shift in the air, that small, persistent voice that whispers when something is profoundly wrong. A partner who suddenly becomes secretive. A family member whose support feels conditional. A professional relationship that starts to feel more like a cage than a partnership. It is profoundly human to want to silence that voice. To dismiss our intuition as paranoia because confronting the truth feels too monumental. Too destructive. Elara's journey teaches us that honoring that instinct isn't a weakness. It is our most essential tool for self-preservation. Her ultimate victory wasn't found in the spectacular downfall of her betrayers, but in her quiet, methodical refusal to be erased. She understood that her value wasn't something that could be given or taken away by a husband, a family, or an investor. It was inherent in her integrity, her skill, and her creation, her raison d'être. The most powerful move she made wasn't destroying their world, but liberating herself to build a new one, stronger and more authentic. From the ashes. We've all had moments where our gut feeling was trying to tell us something important. What was a time you chose to trust that instinct, and it led you to the truth? Please feel free to share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the validation someone else needs to read today. Wishing you clarity and strength on whatever path you're on.